Morning to the zombies. 7 o'clock in the morning, Monday, October 13th, 2025. I don't like giving Trump any accolades because he has been damaging our country in the United States for so long and so far. But at this point, I'm turning on MSNBC for news.
Today, reporting from New York, and we're so glad that you are with us on this very busy Monday. And we start with the breaking news: elation and relief in the Middle East. After more than 2 years of terror and tragedy, families are finally reunited, and tears are flowing after Hamas has released all 20 remaining living Israeli hostages. As part of President Trump's peace plan, Israel has also agreed to release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. With the fragile truce between Israel and Hamas holding, world leaders hope to seize this moment and cement it into a lasting peace. Right now, President Trump is set to meet with Arab leaders in Egypt. It follows a lengthy speech he delivered to the Israeli Knesset, the Israeli parliament, that served as a victory lap for himself and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's begin with MSNBC's David Noriega in Tel Aviv, Israel. Also with us, our White House correspondent Kayla Gardner, Jerusalem Journal founder and former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post, Avi Meir, and global affairs journalist Elise Labit. David, all of the living hostages are now in Israel. What's the mood there on the ground, and where do things stand when it comes to phase one of this peace plan?
Ariel, the mood here in Hostage Square, I would say, has shifted subtly over the course of the last hour or so from what was for a moment very intense kind of jubilation and relief. There was a lot of cheering and shouting, a couple moments when military helicopters passed overhead carrying some of the hostages, which led to a really explosive reaction from the crowd. Now there's something definitely still joyful, but also a little bit more muted, which I attribute to some extent to exhaustion. I was here a little less than 2 years ago during the first ceasefire agreement, which was just a few weeks after October 7th, and I keep comparing what's happening today to what was happening then, when the attack of October 7th, the International Criminal Court and many others have described as war crimes committed by Hamas against the civilians who were murdered and kidnapped on that day. The intervening 2 years, during the intervening 2 years, it was the remaining hostages in Gaza that really kept that day alive in the lived experience of the people who gather here, sometimes every day, at least once a week. That is what kept October 7th alive in Israel. Now that that is over, that chapter is over, every living hostage is back, people, without me even asking them, are starting to talk to me about what comes next, right? What do we do now? And they're telling me about a sense of sort of heaviness and sadness that they feel now that they've also allowed themselves to feel relief. I'll play you a little bit of a conversation that I had with someone that I met here who's American, actually lives part-time in the United States and part-time here in Tel Aviv. Take a listen.
Pure gratitude. It's a mix. We know how to, in Israel, we know how to have joy and how to cry at the same time. We really see the Jewish people as a family. And how would you feel if your family member was stolen from you and in a hole for 2 years? Just so unbelievably grateful that they're. I can't really put it into words. And it's not me. It's literally every Israeli, every Jewish person around the world feels this incredible debt of gratitude. Huge gratitude to President Trump. Who in the world could have pulled this off? I'm not a political person.
Ariel, as for the agreement, phase one of the agreement, which involved the release of living hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, the Israelis are now releasing those Palestinian prisoners. That process is expected to finish today. It's many more people, close to 2,000 people, who are being released on the Palestinian side. One of the groups representing the hostage families is protesting the fact that a number of the deceased Israeli hostages, their remains have not yet been returned. I think it's a little bit of a question whether that constitutes a violation of the first phase of the agreement. But really, Ariel, I know we're going to be talking for a while, so one of the things that's really important to keep in mind here is that in some ways this is the end of the story, but really in a lot of ways the story is only beginning, not just for the people here, but very much so also for the people of Gaza and for every other Palestinian living both inside Israel and in the occupied West Bank, as well as in Gaza, Ariel.
And David, just really quickly, if you could give us a sense of the condition of the Israeli hostages.
medical teams that are in charge of caring for them. They've been released into the care of these medical teams. That they're not giving very detailed, precise information as to their condition, in part because they say privacy is a very important factor in their recovery, that they need to recover both physically and psychologically from the ordeal of the last 2 years. So we don't know a lot about, in too much detail about their physical condition. What they've told us is that they are in the process of recovery. They are in good hands, and we should be getting more detail in the coming days. Now, of course, because other hostages have been released in prior ceasefire agreements, we know that this experience was profoundly traumatic, both psychologically and physically, for the people who spent time in captivity in Gaza area.
I know you will continue to follow their conditions. And Avi, put this moment, the enormity of this moment, into context for us when it comes to the Israeli society. 738 days of collective agony now coming to a close.
Well, Ariel, if I look a little bleary-eyed, it's because I pulled an all-nighter in anticipation of this day, and also because I spent much of this day in tears, as I think have many Israelis. This is, as your correspondent said, a tremendous sense of relief, and it almost feels surreal that this is a moment that we have been praying for, that we've been desperate to see for 2 full years. Tomorrow actually marks the 2-year anniversary according to the Jewish calendar, and so to actually have this happen is just unbelievable to so many of us. And of course that is countered and perhaps couched to some extent by the sense of grief that many families are feeling, learning that their loved ones are not going to be coming home alive, and that some of them may not come back at all. We know that at this point Hamas is saying that they're only able to return 4 of the 28 bodies. That's 14% of the 28 bodies that they're currently holding, and they claim that they can't find the rest. That is viewed by many Israelis as a significant violation of their commitments under the ceasefire agreement, and we have to see how Israel responds over the next few days.
Avi, how are Israelis reconciling this immense relief with the feeling of tepid anticipation about what comes next? Do Israelis feel that Hamas has been sufficiently incapacitated, and what are you looking for in this next phase too?
Well, look, I think the Israeli government was pretty straightforward in what its conditions were going to be to end this war. The first, of course, was the return of those hostages. That seems to have been partially satisfied today. But other conditions included the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip and the removal of Hamas as both a governing power and as a threat to the state of Israel. Now, that, of course, has been partially achieved. We know that Hamas is not the same Hamas as it was on October 6th or 7th, but certainly the Strip itself is not demilitarized. You see Hamas militants walking around armed very openly now, basically filling the vacuum that Israel left by withdrawing to this new boundary. And so there's significant concerns about it in Israel about what that might look like and how we can ensure that Hamas does not reemerge as a threat, does not rearm over the next few years and pose yet another threat to the state of Israel. Now that, of course, does sort of allude to the second stage of this. We know that there's going to be a big conference tomorrow, a summit of world leaders to talk about the future of Gaza and what the governing authority will look like. But one of the primary tasks will be to ensure that that territory is indeed demilitarized so that Hamas can never again pose a threat to the people of Israel.
So, Elise, zoom out for a moment, given the context we just heard from Avi. After years of watching this region, as you have, give us a sense of how pivotal this moment is for Israelis and Palestinians and how complicated the days ahead will look.
Well, I don't think you can really underestimate either. I mean, as both of your guests have already said, this is a moment for both sides of relief and grief. Relief for this day, this monumentous day, the release of the hostages, the withdrawal of Israeli troops, and release of some Palestinian prisoners, but also the intense grief that they've had over the past few years. So I think the region's going to be a little shell-shocked, but I do think there is a new day. Let's be honest, the war is not over. I know President Trump has said the war is over. There's still 2 more phases of the war that need to be resolved. Who's going to run Gaza? Who's going to disarm Hamas? How is that international force going to come in? And that's what President Trump is going to be doing today at this summit in Egypt, talking about the way forward. How can the region really stay engaged to make sure that Gaza is rebuilt, that the international community helps Gaza, helps the Palestinians stand up governance. There's talk about who's going to govern Gaza, but the Palestinians Palestinians are really have a deficit in leadership. Mahmoud Abbas is like 20 years into a 4-year term, so the Palestinians need to rebuild themselves as well. There's going to be a lot of trepidation between the two sides about security and whether they can trust each other. But I think for the rest of the region, there's this just collective sigh of relief that this is not this kind of albatross hanging over the neck of the region. And I think what's happened over the last 2 years, the degradation of all of Iran's proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the attack between Israel, the U.S. and Israel on Iran, has really changed the security architecture and the landscape of the region. And so I think for the rest of the region, there is a hope that Iran has been kind of defanged, if you will. But there is a concern now that Israel, is Israel the main threat? So I think the way that the U.S. stays engaged and makes sure everyone kind of keeps the eye on the ball will determine whether the region moves towards peace or not.
And speaking of that, Akela, President Trump, as we've been mentioning, is making his way to Sharm el-Sheikh with these other leaders of Arab states, Muslim nations. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, who Elise mentioned is not wildly popular among his own people, and there will be European leaders present there. What message is he hoping to deliver as he engages with all these leaders?
Well, we expect his message to largely be celebratory, much like the speech that he gave earlier today to the Israeli parliament. We also expect him to talk about broader peace in the Middle East and really this normalization that the Trump administration has really pursued since President Trump's first term. But not in attendance today, even though he was invited, is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is citing the Jewish holiday in Israel there for why he's not attending. But despite that fact, President Trump heaped praise on him today in his speech. Take a listen to what some of he had to say.
I want to express my gratitude to a man of exceptional courage and patriotism, whose partnership did so much to make this momentous day possible. You know who I'm talking about. There's only one, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We make the best weapons in the world, and we've got a lot of them. And we've given a lot to Israel, frankly, and you obviously used them very well. I'm proud to be the best friend that Israel has ever had, and they all say it.
President Trump also called for Netanyahu to be pardoned, who is facing alleged corruption charges. But at the same time, despite the praise, he also said he's not the easiest person to work with over the past couple of months. We know there has been some tensions between these two leaders, and it's really unclear what Netanyahu's role and influence is going to look like going forward.
Avi, as Akela mentioned, Netanyahu declined Trump's invitation to go to this summit, citing the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. Is that a normal course for this prime minister, or is there something deeper here? And how will Israelis perceive his absence?
So that entire saga is actually somewhat amusing. What we understand from various reporting sources is that actually the prime minister was not initially invited. And when he mentioned that to the president as they were riding in the Beast from Ben Gurion Airport to Jerusalem, the president said, well, why don't you come? And he put him on the phone with President al-Sisi of Egypt, and essentially that was when the invitation was extended. And initially the word had come from the Prime Minister's office that he was indeed going to attend. This is, of course, a tremendous opportunity for him to take a bit of a victory lap and perhaps hobnob with some regional and global leaders, but ultimately he fought the better of it. And yes, the official excuse is the holiday of Simchat Torah, which starts in just about an hour and a half here, but there are those who suggest that he was concerned about a potential interaction with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. There could be some discomfort there if they were photographed together, if they were forced to shake hands, and so he wanted to avoid that situation entirely.
Okay, so at least the diplomatic scramble was on in the past few weeks that led to this deal actually coming together. The fact that the diplomatic push just hasn't led up, at least not yet, with Trump now in the region, major actors are talking today. What does that tell you, and will it be possible for Trump to keep his eye on the prize here and continue to pressure all the parties involved?
I think this deal came together largely because of President Trump leveraging the relationships, leveraging what happened with Qatar. Avi mentioned the call that he did with President Sisi. Remember that call that he put Prime Minister Netanyahu kind of spontaneously on the phone with the Prime Minister of Qatar after that attack. And so really just kind of It was very skillful diplomacy, I will say, and I think it's going to be incumbent on the international community to continue to encourage Trump to keep him involved. We know that his attention span, like he's got a lot of things that he's juggling, and so the fear is that he won't stay engaged and keep everyone on point. And so I think if they continue to encourage him, that I think is really going to be what's really important to make sure that this deal stays on track. Otherwise, I'm afraid that future phases will not be implemented.
It will be really critical to see what comes out of Sharm el Sheikh today and in the days ahead. Thank you again to David Noriega for his reporting, Kayla Gardner, Elise Labit, and Avi Mayer. We appreciate all of you. And still ahead, we'll talk to the International Rescue Committee about the Herculean humanitarian efforts underway right now for Gaza, that a ceasefire has now been in place, and the aid that is badly needed. But first, they're free. What happens next for the former hostages after 2 years in captivity? We'll talk to an expert who himself was kidnapped by the Taliban about the life that he leads now on the other side. How do they get through it? We're back here in 90 seconds.
And that is going to be a question concerning about how the survivors are going to be dealing with the aftermath of 2 years living in hell and then suddenly freed, and how they're going to be dealing with their sudden freedom. I am reminded of church services on Robert H. Schuller, Hour of Power, after the hostages had been released from the Iranian embassy situation. Actually, the U.S. embassy in Iran, when it was overrun. And there was some of the hostages were making press go-arounds, but one particular priest was. I remember his face, but I can't remember his name. But a very humbled, quiet man who was on the pulpit with Schuller. And the pastor was talking about him being isolated and alone, having a lot of things taken away from him, including a button that this pastor held onto. And even he was trying to pray and give it up to God and saying, "Oh God, you want the button, you got it." So he gave up the button. And then he was freed. He was freed. The outside forces, such as Ronald Reagan, making blusterous moves, was that something of a movement to get the hostages freed back in 1980, or 1981 actually? When the Israeli-Hamas situation happened a couple of years back, it's when President Biden was in office. Biden was trying to do everything he could to keep the situation from exploding, but I don't know if he actually tried to do a 21-piece point to a peace plan to get it going. He wanted to see a two-state solution, Biden did, Palestinian and Israeli. I doubt Trump's going to be looking forward to that. But I know he was looking forward to getting his Nobel Peace Prize because he was an egomaniac, and he's still looking for that. And this is one of those things, in my opinion, and my observations, that he's doing. He's trying to get a way to get the Nobel Peace Prize again. If not this year, it's already been screwed over, but next year, that he'll use this and hype it up. Israel will push it because they tried to push it the last time. But the committee said no, they're not going to be dealing with all this political pressure. It's not worth it. One second, guys. I wanted to find out, what does the Nobel Peace Prize consist of? On the website itself of the Nobel Peace Prize organization, I'm going into the About section of it. Nobel had started this thing. He was an inventor, entrepreneur, and businessman. He wanted his fortune to be used to reward those who, during the preceding year, shall have conferred the greatest benefit to humanity, or humankind. And if they're involved in physics, chemistry, physiology, medicine, literature, and peace. I wanted to see just what does it consist of. What makes the Peace Prize so worthwhile? There are several categories for it, but wanted to see the actual what the actual price is. Money, name recognition, that's about it. Is there anything else? But when you get a Nobel Peace Prize or a Nobel Prize, it's something of austere. It's ostentatious. It's an ego building, if you will. Yeah, a lot of people have been chasing after it, but the thing is, they never realized that their works for so many years of trying to build up something that they wanted to do, a legacy, got recognized by other people. And sometimes it took them years to get the Nobel Prize. It took them decades. There's been a lot of controversies according to what Wikipedia had been talking about. But I wanted to see what the damn prize was all about. What was so important about this thing that the guy who made TNT to blow things up saw the danger in this invention and wanted people to chase peace or science or literature. Of course, when you get nominated and selected, and they have to work it out whether or not this guy is going to be getting it or not, or this person is going to be getting it or not. Okay, you get a piece of paper, diploma, get a medal, document confirming the prize amount. The money awarded varies over time, depending on the profitability of the Nobel's bequest investments and exchange rate to the recipient's local currency. Sometimes you got about 100,000, sometimes you got about $1 million. But the thing of it is, it's it's nice and shiny, and it looks gold or gold plated. But what it is basically something that tells people that this person had been going beyond ego, personality, trying to be altruistic in a way of securing something that they didn't want a reward for, except maybe to see a life's work come to life, and that would be the reward itself. But I know there's others who are chasing the prize because of the ego, because of the glint of the medal, and because of the honor bestowed upon a person, which is ego-driven as well. I mean, if you're ego-hungry and you want that prize, you'll do anything to get it. And the U.S. president tried in my lifetime that I'd seen. Had nations pour their requests upon the committee because they thought this guy was worthy. And he kept pushing his own agenda even through his own press release. This is the same asshole, the one in Israel, making a speech about the hostages, but more about himself, puffing up his chest again. And if you notice, Netanyahu wasn't there. He claimed it was a Jewish holiday. Well, was today a Jewish holiday? Let me find out. Okay, so going to Shabbat.org for the holidays. I'm looking over for October. Okay. We have Sukkot. 7 days of Sukkot, celebrated by dwelling in a Sukkot, taking the 4 kinds and rejoicing, is the holiday when we expose ourselves to the element in covered huts, commemorating God's sheltering our ancestors as they traveled from Egypt to the Promised Land. The 4 kinds express our unity and our belief in God's omnipresence. Coming after the solemn high holidays, it is a time of joy and happiness. So this lasts between sunset of Monday, October 6th, and ends the nightfall of October 13th, which means today. Which means there's no work permitted, and maybe some restrictions between the 12th, actually between the 9th and the 13th. And it is important to them. So this had to happen on a holiday that affects the Jewish nation and the Jewish people. They get their hostages. They get the 20 last living for them. And for anybody else, I'm still trying to find out how many more hostages, if there are still any, and if Hamas forgot all about them. Are they dead or are they alive? Don't know yet. But I was going to make a point concerning about Trump. Some of the media may give him points on this one for coming up with this. I am prideful, I am arrogant, I am egotistical myself. I do not trust this son of a bitch. And he's chasing his ego. He's not chasing humanity. He's not chasing altruism. He's chasing his fucking ego. I am not giving him any points. He has been hurting his own people, and I'm not giving him any accolades at all. It was nice for him to do that for Israel, but he was doing it for his own greed, his own gluttony. I don't trust the bastard. I'll never will. And that's anger. Anger is what he's been doing to my people. For me, he doesn't get the peace. He doesn't get the Nobel Prize. He was chasing after it. He wanted the glint. He wanted the glamour. He wanted the ego boosted. His efforts are in vain. I'm not rewarding him.